When I'm walking down the street.
I do want to say to Doni and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
my head up.
I'm South Carolina, so I just
got it.
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Morris?
Oh, my heart.
Happy 20th anniversary.
My heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? John.
And dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself.
The doctor lived next door to the janitor, to the reverend, and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks either. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Doni, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it all and more.
Letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you.
First name's Doni, last name's Glover. Entered the winning for the long haul. Baby, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. We have one special interview for you today. Without further ado, we're going to bring to these airwaves on blackusa.news, Mr. Ruquan Brown. How are you, sir? Good morning, Ruquan.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's early. I'm excited to be here. The intro was super black. I'm so happy about that.
I can't figure out, are you from Seattle or are you from the district?
That's a good question. I was born in Seattle, and then I've been in D.C. the last 10 years.
Okay, so are you a fan of go-go?
Oh, I'm definitely a fan of go-go, no question.
Chuck Brown, the whole nine.
There we go. There was all of it. All the history and everything. Yes, sir.
Now, before we get to the matter at hand of President Claudine Gay, I want you to share with us, for those who may not know, your both your sports and your academic background.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So I started playing football when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I got a chance to play for Deion Sanders down in Texas between ages of 7 and 10 or so. Moved to D.C., played for Watkins in D.C., and we went and won national championships and things like that. Then went to high school and played at Theodore Roosevelt in Uptown D.C. I was offered by 25 schools to play football at the Division I level, 7 of the 8 Ivies and 18 other full rides. And so that was the dream come true for me. I decided to go to Harvard after my top 3 being Yale, Columbia, and Harvard. And I played for my first 2 years. The first year was COVID, so it was a bunch of training, rehabbing, preparing my body. The second year I played, I traveled, I played some, but I decided that there's a wealth of opportunity and that I wanted to walk away from the game in order to really explore all that the institution called Harvard has to offer and see what I could do with it. You look at men like Martin King, you look at men like Barack Obama, you look at men like Reginald Lewis, you look at men like Ray McGuire, you look at men like Robert Smith. These are men who traveled through the field of Ivy League, so to say, and were able to score touchdowns that you can't score in a helmet. And I wanted to see how I could achieve some of those things, and taking the time off has given me leverage to figure that out.
I have to ask you, did W.E.B. Du Bois come into your conversation with yourself at all during this journey?
Oh, no question. I mean, my friends, I have a brother who's sociologist. He's going to go to law school in the next law school cycle, and he loves W.B. Du Bois. He did a thesis on W.B. Du Bois, so people think they've read W.B. Du Bois, but this gentleman has actually read Mr. Du Bois because he studied the texts that are hidden in the Harvard libraries and things of that even the public doesn't have access to. And so I'm reminded on a daily basis that the men and women that I'm around are the descendants of, the children of W.E.B. Du Bois and James Baldwin and Bell Hooks, who are some of my favorite.
Where did this thirst for knowledge come from?
I was incentivized as a youth through very, very, very Black people to explore my own culture and lineage. I think what happens for descendants of enslaved people that are in this nation is that we are so eager often and are incentivized to study everyone else's history, whether it be the history on the continent, which is still our history, no question, or whether it be the history of America, or whether it be European or Asian history. We're encouraged to explore that. We're not really encouraged to explore the history of the descendants of enslaved people, to explore the history of Du Bois, and to explore the history of Martin King and their families and their people and our people. And my family encouraged me to know who I am. I went to Howard University Middle School, Math and Science in DC. So I got an opportunity to be at an HBCU as a youth and be invigorated with a hunger and a thirst for truth at the end of the day. Once you start to explore truth, you find it, whether you want to or not, right? You don't really pick what you learn. You just start to explore this thing. And these things, if they're real, they're going to present themselves and they're going to be firm and they'll never die.
Well, Ruquan, I'm proud to share with you. This is my second book, I Am Black Wall Street. I look at the history of the people who established Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Yep,
and where they came from. And this is my first book, Unapologetically Black. This came out in 2015. This one came out in 2021. But in this one here, I came to learn that, for instance, the first Black man that stepped on North America in modern times, in the past 500 years, was not an enslaved African. He was a Spanish conquistador named Juan Garrido. And it happened down in Florida. I've learned that our people have been here in this land hundreds, if not thousands of years, long before Columbus. And I think the biggest thing I learned was how the Moors dominated the Iberian Peninsula, i.e. Portugal and Spain, for 800 years. That we have so much history that's been hidden from us. And as you noted, the more we dig, the more we find out. So it must be, how does it feel to be not just a Harvard student, but at this juncture, I would say you're doing some legendary deeds?
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know, how I'll look at what I'm accomplishing and what I'm doing yet, but I do know that it's impactful, and I don't take it lightly. I know that what the things that I'm working on make an impact on yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and I'm excited about that. It's a blessing. It also comes with some burden, like many blessings do, right? I have a life to live, Lord willing, and I have to be cautious about what I say, what I think out loud, who I'm with, etc. Not because the world is contaminated or anything of that nature, but because there are some things that could come that I don't know, and I want to be as wise as possible as I approach some of those things. So I feel confident, but listen, the game isn't over, and if we don't learn, if we choose to learn one thing from what we saw with Madam President Claudine Gay, we should recognize that the game is never really over. And so you should make sure that you cross your T's, dot your I's. So I don't rest in what I've done too much, because I haven't done anything compared to anybody that I admire.
Well, I don't know. And I pray the good Lord keeps you protected. I pray that you think before you speak, but the world is watching you. So let's get to it. Harvard president, Dr. Claudine Gay, she was pushed out within weeks of being hired. How long was she there? 6 months?
Yeah, just about.
I did a little research, and it seems as though one thing led to another. But one, they leaned on her about her. They said she had a tepid response to anti-Semitism, which I find very insulting because we are Semites, if you ask me. As a matter of fact, the original Hebrew was black. So how this world is flipped and twisted, the whole scenario. I mean, I'm sure you've seen what happened October 7th over in the Gaza Strip, and the consequent protests against Israel and the United States worldwide.
Yep.
As it relates to some over 21,000 Palestinians being killed. Secondly, they said that she had a disastrous testimony before the House panel. And lastly, the mounting allegations of plagiarism.
Yep.
So here's the chance. I'd love for you to share with us what's wrong with that picture.
Well, look, there are 1,500 things wrong with the picture the picture of the Israel-Palestine war and the Israel and Palestine relationship, which has come thousands of years before any of us are tweeting about it, as passionate as we are. There is 1,000 problems with the image of Black women in the academic / corporate structure and the way that they are handled. There is 1,000 things wrong with the hypocrisy of institutions who might claim problem with plagiarism or claim problem with some racist or anti-Semitic take. There are problems with all those things, and I'll address them one by one. I haven't made any public opinion about the Israel-Palestine war because, in my opinion, it's almost, especially considering the lack of information, lack of truth that we receive through the media channels, it almost be blasphemous, in my opinion, to make really, really firm arguments. Now, what we can firmly say is that the genocide of any group is something that we should be working against, period. And I don't know any example of when the genocide of people by human hands becomes okay.
Yes, totally agree.
What I'm not wise enough in this moment in my life to comment on is the reason that this conflict exists, and the details of the conflict, the roots of the conflict, and what's existing in between and underneath it. I do think that there are some people who do have that information and, however, are choosing not to articulate about some of the depths of this argument. I think it would clear up a lot of things for those who maybe are from that region most recently and have been able to witness through their grandparents, through their great-grandparents, the conflict with their own eyes. Maybe they could give some insight so that we could have more mercy, more grace on both sides. Because it seems like the claim is, hey, the Israeli people are in the right, and the other side saying the Palestinian people are in the right and the Israeli people are in the wrong, and the Israeli people are in the right and the Palestinian people are in the wrong. And anybody who's lived long enough knows that usually conflicts are not that straightforward. Usually conflicts come with more strings. And so that moves forward to not just the Black woman, but the Black man, the white woman, and the white man, and whoever else in the corporate structure who doesn't have the leverage to comment whatever they think. You have an obligation to comment what the institution that's paying you believes. And that's
right.
Right? I mean, you could say what you want, just you may not have a job, or you may not sit in the seat that you worked hard to sit in.
Yes.
Which could be embarrassing in front of the world, as we saw. And so I'm disappointed about the lack of truth that we're able to articulate. What I'm not claiming is that the way that she handled that was the best way at the in front of the court, in front of the Senate. I don't think that was the perfect way to do that, which I won't comment on at this time. But I do think that there is a lineage, a history of people having to walk on eggshells in how they answer questions, particularly related to this conflict. The
Yes.
reason that matters is because it's unfair to place weight on one individual in handling, in verbally handling this conflict perfectly, because no institution has accomplished it.
Yes.
The Israeli government hasn't accomplished it.
That's right.
The Palestinian government has not accomplished it. The
That's
American government has not accomplished it. But what this does do, though, is it plays right in alignment with what we expect from Black people in this country. We expect Black people to figure it out and to have the right answers. And frankly, despite all of the barriers, in many ways, we've been able to do that. In many ways,
there was an icon named Ralph Bunche. And Ralph Bunche helped negotiate peace in the Middle East, a Black man. And I also wanted to share with you that I've been to a Palestinian refugee camp over in Jordan back in 2002, just as the U.S. troops were about to invade Iraq. And I sat with a Palestinian man. And he told me of a time prior to 1945 when Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived in harmony in that region. But then came the Zionist movement, where the European Jews started to flood that area. And then when I looked at the October 7th, what happened on October 7th, Israel's 9/11, essentially, you got people living swell over here, and you got people living in poverty over here. And those people living in poverty, just like in my city, I live in Baltimore, tale of two cities. There's the Black section, and there's the white section.
Yeah.
The investment
I said that reminds me of much of the world and much of America too.
Where investment tends to go into the white areas and a lack of investment in the Black areas. In South Africa, we saw the same thing. The Dutch Boers, they came down, they moved into South Africa. The Blacks are living in shanty towns. And this is home of one of the largest diamond reserves. I don't know if they have as many as Botswana located just above them, but you got people doing good on one side and bad on the other side. Yep. Invariably, there's going to be conflict. I don't care if they're Black, white, green, Muslim, Pakistani, Jew. There's going to be a problem at some point. Those poor kids are going to bust one of them rich white kids upside the head and take their money. It's just common sense. So spread it around. Give everybody a little something. That's what makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I certainly understand where you're coming from. Unfortunately, the conversation in government, the conversation at the academic level, and even at the corporate level, furthermore, at the community level, we haven't been able to come to really, really confident reconciliation around any of these issues. And it's unfortunate because I think we have the resources and the knowledge to figure it out. Certainly there's the resources. Certainly the wealth is available. Certainly the land is available. Certainly there's enough to go around. But unfortunately, there's a book that says we don't fight against flesh and blood, but we fight against principalities and spiritual forces in high and low places. And the reason that matters is because we tend to focus on the flesh. We tend to focus on the human in front of us, when in reality, it's often what's inside the human that's preventing us from holding hands. And we don't usually address that. And our censorship, the lack of free speech, to some degree, is responsible for the lack of community and connection that could exist. If I'm not allowed to say what I really think, you'll never really know who I am. And so you'll never trust to hold my hand. But if you can hear how I really feel, you can make a decision with how much you share about yourself, or if you choose to hold my hand and walk forward. So there's a lot that needs to be worked on. What I do know is that me and you can make an impact, and we can make an even bigger impact together. What I also know is that I won't be able to make it alone, and neither will you or President Gay, and neither will Harvard, and neither will America. Because even if America decides to get its stuff together, China and Russia and all the other African countries have to agree. And if not, there will be a war again. So that is what life is, and we should use the wisdom of our ancestors, of our forefathers, to know that life is life, and it comes with conflict. And hopefully we protect each other. Hopefully we put our desires, our selfish desires to the side in order to serve the people around us. But history says we won't do that, unfortunately.
Where do you see Ruquan Brown in the next 10 years?
I see Ruquan building heaven on earth for poor people around the world. It's not just in America. It's not just in the Middle East. It's not just in the continent, not in Asia only, not here only, not there only, but for poor people around the world. And when we start to identify who poor people are, we start to look at people who lack anything that would give them life. And life for me is comprised of 4 areas: mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And if there's in any of those elements, if something has been extracted or has never existed in your life for you to experience the entirety of life and what it has to offer, my mission is to ensure that we connect those dots for people around the world. So there are some people with a lot of money and with, body parts that are intact, but their hearts and their souls are really, really far from life. And so we're on a mission to serve those people too. And what that looks like, we're still defining. I'm still sitting down with friends and family and talking with people like you to learn what it's going to take. But we're learning as we go.
Is it your job to protect Black women?
Well, certainly not my job alone, but it is my job to speak up for any person or persons who their voice isn't being heard. And that happens to be Black women a lot of times. There's no way to argue against that. When you look at Serena Williams, who's one of the richest Black women in the world, and the fact that she almost died during childbirth because her doctors didn't believe that she felt pain. That's the same. How much more do you think a poor woman in Washington, D.C. or Baltimore is not heard? And so I absolutely have an obligation to speak up on their behalf. But I also have a duty, and many men forget this, I think, to love the women that are in my life, right? I should love my wife well. I should love my children well. I should love my mother and my auntie well. And then we can talk about how I'm going to love the rest of the world. But what I would encourage is that each man that I know really go and hug his daughter and hug his wife and be honest, right? Because we talked about the honesty in our communities, and not just Black ones, but around the world. We're struggling with just confessing what our heart truly is and being honest. And I think that will help a lot of people.
Who does Ruquan Brown look up to?
My idol is Jesus. That's it, man. Because I'm inspired by, Professor Ron Sullivan from Harvard Law School. I'm inspired by, Deion Sanders. I'm inspired by Rico Howell from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who was murdered in 2018. I'm inspired by many men. I'm inspired by Trayon White from Washington, D.C. I'm inspired by my own father, Rudolph. I'm inspired by many men and women. I'm inspired by a woman named Valerie Mosley, who has spent a lot of time in the banking world. I'm inspired by many men and women. However, at some point, they all sort of come to an end. There's only so far up that I can look up to them. But with Jesus, there's no matter how far I get, if I'm the president or if I'm, friends with the princes in the Middle East, there's still more to go when it comes to Jesus. And there's so much more room to grow. And that's what I'm interested in, is perfecting love during my time on earth. And that's why I told you my mission is to build heaven on earth.
Have you been to the White House?
I have.
Do you see yourself holding a position there one day?
Well, frankly, I got to give you a politician answer. We all hold positions at the White House, frankly. And that's whether I hold a position there or not, one thing I am interested in doing is creating a better pipeline to the White House for people around the world. Because there are voices that need to be heard by the people in the White House who have power and who have the resources to make moves. And unfortunately, we're really disconnected from the power and I grew up in Washington, D.C. The first time I was invited to the White House was as a college student when I no longer lived in D.C. But I grew up in Washington, D.C. I've been an activist since 12 years old. But the first time I was invited to the White House was once I moved out of D.C. That's problematic in my opinion. And the people who are doing the work in that city have acreage and square footage at that house. And we should be invited there more to collaborate on issues that are happening in our communities.
Do you see China being a problem down the road?
I see anything that we don't discuss openly and honestly being a problem down the road. And the fact that our news cycle is so full of everything else that's happening, while China is probably from their eyes doing good business around the world, it's something that we certainly should be thinking about. If we're interested in protecting this nation, if we're interested in protecting vulnerable nations around the world, we must talk about it. I don't know if it's a problem yet. I don't know for certain. I don't know the details of the deals. I've heard what the news has said. I've heard what some friends have said. But I haven't seen those deals. I do know that there's been a history of exploitation around the world, particularly on African nations, and that we should be cognizant of that. And if we're not, we will be dealing with some challenges down the road.
They are deep in China. I was in Tanzania and Ethiopia back in 2006, and the Chinese were building roads there. I've read a story about there being over a dozen Chinese police stations in South Africa.
Yep.
So we've gone from one neo-colonial era to another neo-colonial era. And I'm at least grateful that you are aware of of some of the developments on the continent, because we are African by nature, and we should have an understanding, just as Jewish people should have an understanding of Israel, and Arab Americans should have an understanding of the various Arab countries. Any final thoughts as we wind down? Anything that we haven't covered? I thank you for this 30 minutes of informative conversation. We're so proud of you. I see you doing anything that you want. And you want to help the little people.
There we go.
How noble.
There we go. Well, I'm grateful. I appreciate that acknowledgement. And listen, it takes collaborating with quote unquote the big people to really serve the little people, right? Because even if I become a billionaire in my lifetime, it won't be enough to by myself to alone make the impact that I desire to make. We need partnerships with the large companies. We need partnerships with large people. We need partnership with large institutions and countries as well. And if we don't think that way, we won't make the catastrophic impact we're thinking about making. And so while I sort of do these institutions a favor, because these institutions usually, it seems, aren't actually interested in serving little people. So where I come along is I can speak the language of the big people while also having a heart for the little people. And that's good for the big companies, right? And for the big institutions and the big people, because they still want to do the work. They just don't care enough to actually get their hands dirty and do it. And when we can make that easy for them, I think that's going to be really helpful for our children and our grandchildren. But I'll be honest, I don't know if the best world that we're ever going to see is going to be in our lifetime, the next lifetime, or the one after it. I believe in Jesus. So that means that there's a life after this one that'll be greater than this one. And so I think our duty here isn't to necessarily create the best world that we can figure out how to create. I think our duty is to master and perfect our hearts, to purify our hearts, so that whatever flows from us will be good. And if we do that, then we wouldn't have to worry so much about his second coming, or for some people, his first coming, or whatever it might look like. I think there's a duty to really perfect our hearts. I'll say this. So many of us we're drinking information. We are baking information and microwaving it, and we are slow cooking it in the crock pot. And we are intellectually sound. Many of us can make the largest and the greatest intellectual arguments, but our hearts are really hard. When it comes to forgiving, when it comes to holding someone that we love, when it comes to admitting our need for growth and change, we struggle. And we almost inundate ourselves. We almost get high off of intellectualness, off of intellect. We almost read ourselves to sleep. We almost rock ourselves through listening to Baldwin, or listening to Obama speeches, or exploring what some people are going to call conspiracy theories about the neo-colonization of the African continent. But we usually don't actually look at our own hearts. And what I want us to remember, Black people around the world, white people around the world, however you identify, I want us to remember that your body decays. It goes away. You're going to lose some hair. Your glasses won't work and you'll need new ones. But the fruits that your heart produces, they usually don't go away. That has an impact on someone's soul. And science says energy never dies. It just goes somewhere else. So I just hope that we're really sowing into the energy that's within us. I hope that we're sowing into the energy that's within us, because these conversations are large, but they're not bigger than us. These conversations are large, but the reason they're so large is because the people involved didn't water, didn't purify, didn't work on their hearts at the level necessary. So I hope we do that, and we might see something different in the future.
Before you go, can you share your favorite Bible verse with us?
Yeah, my favorite Bible verse. My favorite Bible verse is, guard your heart, for from it flow the rivers of life.
Ruquan Brown, we're proud of you. Shine on, black man. Shine on and represent.
Thank you all. I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good day.
Yes, sir.
I'll
Good
talk to you
morning,
soon.
world. Yes, sir.